This is the CBS News special report. I'm Tony Dokoupil in New Orleans, and we are coming on the air because we are expecting a press conference to get underway any moment now with state and local officials. And we're hoping for some updates, some of the big outstanding questions following yesterday's deadly truck attack, a terror incident here on Bourbon Street. Some of those questions are about accomplices. Were there any? Are they still at large? There are also questions about the potential ties to ISIS that President Joe Biden raised in the hours after the attack, and whether the killer had a contact with ISIS or whether it was merely a online inspiration. The president mentioned some videos. I'm here with Omar Villafranca as we await this press conference. This is at State Police Headquarters in Baton Rouge, not all that far from where we are. They got a big compound there. What are the big questions that you hope will be answered today?
Well, we want to find out, of course, as you mentioned, is there anyone else that the police should be looking for and that the public has to worry about at this point? The motivation. There's a lot of speculation. Usually what's good about these press conferences is that all of the crazy things that are floating around on social media get immediately squashed with official language. And that is good because now we can get down to the investigation. But also, we covered these so much, unfortunately. We want to hear also later on about the victims, who these people were, and when the city of New Orleans is going to get back to the business of the city of New Orleans. Listen, right behind us, just behind the cameras, there are thousands of people here who not only came here for New Year's Eve, but they came here for a festivity, a college football game. They want to know, are they going to be safe? Is there some sense of normalcy? Hopefully we'll hear that from the authorities.
We've been saying 15 dead. You mentioned the victims. We now know that includes the killer himself, the driver of the truck. So it's 14 dead locally.
14 dead. And we were at UMC Hospital earlier this morning. They still have 15 victims there that are being treated at this moment. They have others in their system, but that one in New Orleans, they're being treated there. And we talked to the doctor, and he told us they saw all types of injuries. Now, right behind us, Tony, this is where it started. Right behind us where everything went in. So he was telling us about those injuries, gruesome, something that he said it's the biggest mass casualty event they've ever had at that hospital.
Yeah, it's incredible. And we also know from conversations with Ann Kirkpatrick, who's the chief of police here, that there was a bollard system to prevent vehicle attacks on Bourbon Street. That system was removed for repair and improvement. It was going to be replaced by a better system, but there was this gap period. One of the questions I hope they address here at the press conference is how the driver of the truck knew that there was this soft spot, or was it merely an attack of opportunity? Was he driving by looking for an opening?
That's an interesting question. That video, which had happened behind us, you see him pass the police car, go around on the sidewalk and go in. Maybe he saw something. Hopefully we'll hear something about it during the investigation, that's what he saw. But if you've ever spent any time in the French Quarter, you see those bollards. And I describe it to people, there's these things that are in the road, if you've ever been around the White House and the Capitol too, they lift up off the ground like that. So a car, it's like a mini wall. People are used to walking around these when it's pedestrian traffic, because that's what the French Quarter is all about. You grab your drink, you listen to music, and you walk around. But when were these upgrades supposed to be finished? We understand it's supposed to be finished by the Super Bowl, because that doesn't happen all the time.
The projects have a way of being delayed, particularly when it involves manufacturing. Nicole Skanga's following all this from Washington for us. Nicole, I'm fascinated by an answer I got earlier this morning from Ann Kirkpatrick, the chief of police here in New Orleans. I asked her about accomplices, and she said, well, it's not that we think there are, it's that we can't rule out that there are not. What do you make of that language?
Well, Tony, we actually have brand new information. A U.S. official familiar with the investigation telling our colleague Andy Trier that the FBI now believes there are no accomplices in the attack in New Orleans. And I'll wrap here. I believe officials are coming to the stage.
Yeah, Nicole, thank you. That is great new information, and we're hoping to get a lot more of it right now. I believe that's the governor of Louisiana there, Jeff Landry, addressing the audience. Let's listen in.
Reminding the citizens of Louisiana that as you travel around the state, you will see the flags of all state buildings at half-mast in honor of those lives that were lost in this horrific act of violence. I also think that it's important to remember that what happened yesterday was akin to those who are old enough to remember jigsaw puzzles. And that you would take a 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzle and you empty the box, and you've got to start sifting through those pieces, and you want to start, if you're real good, you start at the corners, right? Try to put your corners together. And from yesterday to today, over 1,000 law enforcement agents and officers, men and women, have been poring over countless amounts of data, of videos, of surveillances, interviews, tracking down every possible lead that came to us, whether it was the New Orleans Police Department, the Louisiana State Police, the FBI, or our other federal agencies. Also yesterday, I issued an emergency declaration. That declaration was meant to streamline resources and communications between state, local, and federal partners. And we're seeing the results of it. I also would like to remind everyone that what's going on in this city and this state is twofold. We've got an active criminal investigation going on, while we're also continuing to secure the city in preparation for 3 o'clock kickoff time for the Sugar Bowl. With that, I would also remind those who are in the city that as far as state resources are concerned, we have the Louisiana State Police, the Louisiana National Guard, which was part of that emergency declaration, which allowed us to put an entire MP company on the ground. Those become force multipliers, is what we call that in law enforcement and the military. That helps to add to the resources that we have. Wildlife and Fisheries, the Department of Corrections, DSF, DHS, our Veterans Affairs, our Probation and Parole, all state agencies. Any state agency who has post-certified officers are here in this city to help secure the city. And so with that, I would like to turn it over to Christopher Rea, who is the Deputy Assistant Director of the FBI's Counter Terrorism Division. Chris?
Thank you, Governor Landry. Good morning. I am FBI Deputy Assistant Director Christopher Rea. I'm from our Counterterrorism Division at headquarters. I'm also joined by Assistant Special Agent in Charge Alethea Duncan from our New Orleans office, who you heard from yesterday. I'm here to discuss not only the latest investigative information we have here in New Orleans, but I'll also let you know about other investigative activities outside of the state. I first, and most importantly, want to send our deepest condolences to the victims of this horrific attack and their loved ones. 14 innocent victims were killed in this senseless attack, and at least 35 are injured. We cannot ease the grief people in this community and across the nation are feeling at this time, but rest assured, we stand with you and in support of you. All the resources, and I'm going to go into that a little bit later, all the resources of the FBI are being focused on tracking down every piece of evidence, every lead, every interview, every potential lead we've got. While I won't be able to answer all your questions today, my goal is to be as forthcoming as possible with you on what we've uncovered so far. First and foremost, let me be very clear about this point. This was an act of terrorism. It was premeditated and an evil act. This was obviously a critical incident, and with that, lots of information and tips come pouring in from law enforcement, first responders, and the public. We have been aggressively running down these tips and information. As you all know, that takes time, and we will continue to do so until every lead has been followed through on. This investigation is only a little more than 24 hours old. So I ask you to keep in mind that as I go through some of the specifics later. But at this point, currently, and this is another fact I want to be clear on, We do not assess at this point that anyone else involved in this attack except for Shamsa Din Jabbar, the subject you've already been briefed on. A little bit about what the FBI is doing. So we are surging people and assets to the area from across the region and across the nation. Special agents in multiple field offices across the country have been deployed and are assisting with potential aspects of this investigation and following up on every lead. Additional teams of special agents, professional staff, and victim specialists continue to arrive to provide more investigative power and assistance to the victims and their families. We have also forward deployed a number of our critical incident response group assets, including members of our hostage rescue team, special agent bomb technicians, and crisis management coordinators. In addition, we have deployed more evidence response technicians to continue to process the various scenes that we have. So far, we have received just over 400 tips from the public, and that information is being followed up on both here in New Orleans and across the country. Some of the tips are here in New Orleans, and there are other tips in other states across the country that we are following up on. The FBI team and our law enforcement partners here are also reviewing hundreds of hours of surveillance and other video from both the French Quarter and other locations. As for a timeline, at this point, investigators believe Jabbar picked up the rented F-150 in Houston, Texas on December 30th. He then drove from Houston to New Orleans on the evening of the 31st, and he posted several videos to an online platform proclaiming his support for ISIS. There were 5 videos posted on Jabbar's Facebook account, which are time-stamped beginning at 1:29 a.m. and the last at 3:02 a.m. In the first video, Jabbar explains he originally planned to harm his family and friends, but was concerned the news headlines would not focus on the, quote, war between the believers and the disbelievers, end quote. Additionally, he stated he had joined ISIS before this summer. He also provided a will and testament. FBI and ATF. FBI, we have a couple different scenes at the location. We have released the scene at Bourbon Street. That scene has been released. We also have a scene off of Mandeville address where we are currently searching that scene right now. FBI and ATF agents have secured that house, and that location is being searched for potential evidence. On New Year's morning, Jabbar opened fire after ramming through a blocked-off area of Bourbon Street, used his truck as a weapon to run over the victims. Teams of specially trained victim specialists, again, as I said, are on the ground here in New Orleans, assisting survivors of the attack and loved ones of the deceased. We do not believe the public is in any danger around any of these locations. 3 phones linked to Jabbar have been recovered, and digital media exploitation is a priority to see what is on the devices and determine if there are any other potential leads. Additionally, we have recovered 2 laptops and are currently reviewing them for any potential leads. Those laptops were recovered at the Mandeville address. Evidence technicians will also be going over the F-150 truck Jabbar was driving. As you know, we recovered an ISIS flag from the back of the vehicle. Jabbar declared his support for the terrorist group on social media, as I stated before, as he made his way to New Orleans. FBI bomb technicians also recovered 2 IEDs in coolers, one from the cross-section of Bourbon and Orleans Street, and the second at an intersection approximately 2 blocks away. There were multiple reports of other devices. Those reports turned out to be misinformation or not actual functioning devices. Those are the only 2 devices that we've been able to recover that were functional. Both devices were rendered safe on scene. We did obtain surveillance footage showing Jabbar placing the devices where they were found. Two other, as I said before, two other items of interest were determined not to be IEDs. A little bit about Jabbar. Jabbar himself was born in the United States and is a U.S. military veteran. We are looking in everything in his life. While we have interviewed many people who know Jabbar, we still need to talk to others. Whether you know Jabbar personally, worked with him, served in the military, or saw him in New Orleans or Texas, we need to talk to you. You may not think you have relevant information, but what you know could tie in to one of our investigative leads. Specifically, we want to talk to anyone who was in the French Quarter on New Year's Eve or early on New Year's Day. That includes people spotted near one of the two IEDs on Bourbon Street. The IED was inside a cooler, and many people stopped and looked at the cooler and then continued on their way. Let's be clear, again, we do not believe at this point these people are involved in this incident in any way. We want to speak to them as witnesses and want to know what they saw and when. I went down to the crime scene last night. It is very hard to put into words what it looked like and how difficult it was to see. Anyone with information can call us at 1-800-CALL-FBI or send digital tips to fbi.gov/Bourbon Street attack. Early this morning, evidence response teams finished their work at the crime scene. Bourbon Street has been turned over to the city of New Orleans. As you know, there's also an FBI investigation in Las Vegas. We are following up on all potential leads and not ruling everything out. However, at this point, there is no definitive link between the attack here in New Orleans and the one in Las Vegas. And again, I'll preface everything with what I started with in the beginning, which was this is very early in an investigation like this. Again, our thoughts and prayers are with the victims of this tragedy and everyone impacted across the country. They remain at the heart of our investigation. I also, although I've only been on the ground here a short time, I also want to express a sincere appreciation for our partners here, which include the U.S. Attorney's Office, HSI, ATF, the New Orleans PD, the Louisiana State Police, the Governor's Office, and countless others. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to the Special Agent in charge of ATF here, Josh Jackson.
Hey, good afternoon. As stated, my name is Joshua Jackson. I am the Special Agent in charge for the ATF New Orleans Field Division. And ATF's primary mission is preventing, reducing, and solving violent crime throughout the United States and abroad. Solving part is the focus of this investigation. ATF resources that have been brought to bear to the city and to focus with our federal, state, and local partners have been our national response team. We spoke about the scene that's still being processed now. The national response team of ATF is a team of certified fire investigators, certified explosive specialists, fire engineers, electrical engineers. These folks will give us additional investigative leads to help the investigative team identify what happened at the location in Mandeville and identify how that fire started and move the investigation forward from there. Additional resources that ATF has brought to bear into the city. There's our ATF Special Response Team. This is a tactical team capable of handling any sort of enforcement operation. This team is deployed, on set, and ready for the Sugar Bowl today. This team is also made available to the Louisiana State Police and also New Orleans Police Department to assist with any efforts that they may have during this period. Additional resources, as the governor alluded to, he executed executive powers and had an emergency declared to where ATF was able to tap in to Emergency Support Function 13 resources. This allowed us to bring additional explosive detection canines so that we can safely sweep the city and safely sweep the Super Bowl in preparation for the game today. These resources will still be in the city as we lead up to the Super Bowl and through Mardi Gras. These type of ATF resources will be here. The last resources the ATF has brought to bear, and probably the most important one, is our victim witness coordinators. These folks come in and they provide resources to the victims and the family members that have suffered greatly during this tragedy. The entire city hurts, but the victims and the family members are in need of resources and care long after this investigation wraps up. This time next year, to be hard for the families and friends who suffered during this event. So our victim witness coordinators are working with the FBI, the City of New Orleans coordinators to provide resources to these folks out here. And as we move forward, ATF will be committed. We will work with the investigative team moving this investigation forward, but also we'll be here to make sure the city is safe and prepared as we move into the Super Bowl. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to our mayor of this great city, New Orleans. Madam Mayor.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Well, good morning once again. And I just want to just echo my thank yous to the unified command of our law enforcement partners and at every single level, federal, state, and governor. Governor, thank you for your partnership. Yeah, thank you. I also want to thank the residents and the visitors of the city of New Orleans for your patience, for your support, and most of all, your prayers. Our hearts and prayers continue to go out to the victims' families, and the city of New Orleans, we're resilient. And as I stated on yesterday, my focus in terms of a priority has been on our victims. As you heard, that yes, the FBI was able to clear Bourbon Street. And what that meant also for me in this city was that we were able to remove our victims, identify them, and notify their families. Real reverence. They mattered, the families matter, and matter to the city of New Orleans. In addition to that, I want to just thank again our federal partners in Washington listening to my plea personally for the additional resources to allow for the scene to be cleared, and again, attending to our victims. I walked by each one, and I did the sign of cross in my own way, because reverence, again, is important. So while we have been able to have Bourbon Street returned back to the city of New Orleans, and the due diligence has been done, that then allowed me to give the go-ahead to begin the cleaning of Bourbon Street. That started happening in the morning about 2 a.m. It was completed before 8 a.m. this morning. But that has really set the tone, I would say, and with the confidence that I have in the law enforcement partners, all of the resources that have been activated, how we have made sure that safety continues to be our top priority, how our assets have been deployed strategically, again, for the safety and the protection of our visitors and our residents in the city. And because of that, the confidence is there to reopen Bourbon Street to the public prior to game time today. The first order will be to allow for vendors to come in and service the businesses. That's important in order for us to stand up activation, as you know, Governor. And so with that, I want to reassure the public that the city of New Orleans is not only ready for game day today, but we're ready to continue to host large-scale events in our city because we are built to host at every single turn. I want to, again, thank all of those who responded to the FBI's call for information and tips. As you heard, that has been useful. Continue to do that. The investigation is still active and absolutely under the FBI's leadership. We will continue to operate and cooperate as we always have. So I want to also thank all of our partners for the added resources for victim and crisis management. We know that that's, again, important. Working with our partner, the Greater New Orleans Foundation, we have set up a fund for our victims' families for not only today but into the future. As you heard, this is going to be a long process for our people. So with that, the city of New Orleans, and with all of my confidence, we are ready. And we could not get here, again, without the unified presence, support, and cooperation. We are stronger together. And I want to say, again, thank you so much. Thank you, Governor. So once again, the governor would like me to reiterate that Bourbon Street will be prepared for full activation before game time today. We know 3 p.m., so we're working towards 2:30 p.m. But prior to game time, the kickoff, Bourbon Street will be restored. So we're hard at work now. Our teams are now, and of course, working with our business community to serve our public and serve our residents and our visitors alike.
In closing, I want to rest people assured. Right now in the city of New Orleans, there's an unprecedented amount of law enforcement resources that are being utilized to close out and to hunt down and to finalize this investigation. I want to thank the FBI and all of our federal partners for the amount of resources they have poured into the city. This type of event can happen in any city. And that's the tragedy of it. And I think it's important for people to understand that to protect our citizens in America from evil, you have to crush it. You can't go out there and placate it. You can't go out there and say, oh, I'm going to put this in place and that in place and hope that evil doesn't show up on your doorstep, because it will. You have to crush it. And that's what we're going to do here. We're going to put it all behind us. We're going to continue to keep the victims, those that are in the hospital, either fighting for their lives or trying to recover, in our thoughts and in our prayers. But you know, this morning, and I don't want to single out just one news source, but I just happened to turn on Fox and Friends, and there was a young man who was interviewed, who was actually on Bourbon Street during this horrific act of terrorism. And they closed out by asking him, what now? And I think he summed it up. He said, look, we can't live in fear, because fear will paralyze us. He said, we come down to the city to enjoy ourselves and to entertain ourselves and to be with our friends and with our families, because that's who we are. Louisiana invented hospitality. The people of this city care for each other. And believe you me, we care about each one of the lives that were lost in the city of that. We will never forget them. But it would be a tragedy if we let their losses be snuffed out because of fear. This city will be back. We will be open to family and friends and loved ones who want some time to relax from the pressures of life. And so today, we're going to have us a sugar bowl. We're going to enjoy ourselves. We're going to keep those, again, who have lost loved ones in mind. And we're going to get on to the business of this city and this great country. With that, I'll take any questions.
Governor, this is for you and the Assistant Director. The message has really changed since yesterday. Yesterday, the FBI said that people should be vigilant, that he did not act alone, that he likely had help, and now you're coming out the very next day and saying he was a lone wolf, everything is safe, the game moves on, everybody have a good time. How can you be so sure just 12 hours later?
Well, we're going to bring him up, all right? But here's what I want to remind everyone. Like, I was a deputy sheriff, right? I worked in a jail, I worked on the street, I worked on the interstate. I served warrants, I can tell you. Look, in today's world, I get it. Information, we get information like that. Everybody lives in a 15-second TikTok video. We think that life operates like it does on our phones, and it just doesn't. Information changes. In fact, that's why we ask the media for patience. We get information, like I said, no one dumps 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzle and puts it together in 5 seconds. Okay? And what I would tell you is that I appreciate the fact that what we did was we're under-promising and over-delivering today. And I think that's important. And I want to remind something. Look, because over the last decade, law enforcement has taken it on the chin, unfairly. And there are great men and women serving in the FBI, in ATF, in Louisiana State Police, in New Orleans PD. Our sheriffs have been unbelievable in this. And I tell you, they want to protect you all. And we have to trust them. And sometimes the information we put out, we end up finding out that it may be incorrect. But guess what? What we're doing here is something that I think is important. It's called transparency. And look, something may change again. Here's what I do know, though. Right now, this is one of the safest places on earth. That doesn't mean that nothing can't happen.
Thank you, Governor. And to echo exactly, I think the governor put it eloquently, as could be said. In a lot of these instances, I also had the opportunity to deploy to Boss Bomb, and I will tell you this is almost carbon copy to Boss Bomb as far as the inaccurate reporting that comes up. And what the governor said is we want to be transparent with the public. Years of the FBI not being transparent, we're being as transparent as we possibly can. And unfortunately, as we're being transparent, unfortunately for that, there is some information that we have to go back and recorrect. And in this particular incident, you heard the resources that we've brought, that the other state and locals have brought. We've had 24 hours now to go through media, to go through phones, to interview people, to analyze those videos, analyze other databases. And after all of that, there's been hundreds and hundreds of leads done just in 24 hours. We're confident at this point that there is no accomplices. And I'll give you an idea of how that information sometimes, a lot of the early reports came out that there were extra people that were setting the coolers down, right? It turns out those were just patrons on the street that were looking inside the coolers, right? Well, we didn't know that at first, so we had to kind of track all that down and put that to rest. So that's just an example, one of the pieces of information, but there were other pieces of information that after we got our feet under us a little bit and on the ground here, we were able to put together a much more accurate picture of the subject and his attention.
Just one follow-up. The updated death toll, we just wanted to double check that.
Yes.
So 14, not 15. Sorry, sir.
14, and then the shooter himself would be 15 total, to include the shooter.
And
Was the terrorist wearing a suicide vest?
the
That's my follow-up.
IEDs, were the IEDs pipe bombs, and have you discovered a remote detonator anywhere? And when you said that you have surveillance footage of the suspect planting those IEDs, what time roughly were they planted?
Yeah, those roughly a couple hours. I don't have the exact times in front of me. A couple hours prior to the attack.
Before midnight, after
attack.
you know,
Probably after midnight. I want to say 1 or 2 in the morning,
So
but I
they
can't.
left the area and came back.
Correct. That's our assumption now. I mean, we still have a lot to work through. We're getting more surveillance video and everything else, but that's the assumption.
Was he wearing a suicide vest?
Were there sweeps being done on Bourbon Street? Would there have been canines out on New Year's Eve? Would there have been bomb sweeps done?
Look, I
as part of
think-
the regular
I thi-
precautions.
Let me just say this, and either Joe or Rob will correct me. Look, a bomb dog doesn't operate like a drug dog, right? On Bourbon Street, there's a lot of senses, right? A lot of smells. I don't think you can run a bomb dog down Bourbon Street with thousands of people there and be able to sniff out a bomb. What we've been doing, what they have been doing, it's certainly a complete sweep of the quarter because of the limited amount of traffic that's been out there. Let me just say this. I think this may help. It would be my hope that as some additional time goes through, maybe closer to maybe the beginning of next week, we will, if we've got it to what extent buttoned up as we could, I would work with the FBI and the city, and maybe we can come up with a timeline to be able to get you those information, kind of walk everyone through from day one through. I think it's extremely premature, and you're really putting us on some speculative grounds to ask some of those questions, because again, it's only been 24 hours. I mean, can you imagine how far we've come in 24 hours?
So, if there was pipe bombs and a remote
Was he wearing the
well, we'll go one at a
What is
time.
being done to make Bourbon Street safer tonight than it was New Year's Eve? Are temporary bollards being brought in to block off the street, and why weren't those used on New Year's Eve?
Well, look, here's what I'm going to say. Every time some bad guy does something like this, there's what we call an after-action review. Because again, nothing is 100%. We have reinforced the area. We have deployed some additional types of assets. I personally, it's up to the city or other. I don't like to give specifics because I don't like to tell the enemy what we got. But I can tell you we're in better shape than we were before.
We have time for two more questions.
Can you speak to the Mandeville scene? And some neighbors at that site told us they smelled smoke early in the morning. Was there a fire there? Any kind of burning happening?
Do you still believe that fire happened after the suspect was killed?
That's correct. Yeah, I'll move to 18. I do want to address the suicide vest question. I want to kill that one right away. Okay. There was no evidence that the subject was wearing a suicide vest at all. So I will turn the Mandeville stuff over to ATF.
Yeah, as to the fire at the Mandeville scene, so our working theory now is that the fire started after Jabbar was already deceased. There's a lot of different ways that can happen. You could have different time devices. You could have a long cord that extended that time. You could also have pressure cookers that were put on top of the stove filled with gasoline, and then it went off. There's a lot of different ways to do it, but that is why our ATF National Response Team is here to answer those questions and get that investigative lead back to our team. So more to come on that. We're still processing that scene. We're out there right now.
Are you able to understand how he became radicalized over all of this time? What brought him to Bourbon Street? Do we understand, was there any international travel involved? What led him down this path to this sort of radicalization?
Sure, a lot of questions we're still asking ourselves. We know that he specifically picked out Bourbon Street. Not quite sure why. I mean, I think one can assume that it was lots of people New Year's Eve, with a target for an attack. That's the stuff in the coming days as far as that path to radicalization that we're really going to be digging into and making a priority of. So what I can tell you right now is that he was 100% inspired by ISIS, and so we're digging through more of the social media, more interviews, working with some of our other partners to ascertain just how to ascertain a little bit more about that connection.
We're gonna do one more. Kate?
Right there. You've had your hand up for a while.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Yeah.
It's actually for Special Agent Ryan. Sir,
I prefer those. I'm gonna check.
In order to reassure people, would you be able to explain the analysis and evidence that has led to this most recent understanding that he was a lone actor and that there is at this point, at least from your understanding, no further danger to the public?
Sure. I think a lot of that, multiple interviews, the hundreds of interviews that we've conducted so far, the social media review that we've done of his accounts, by my count now, the 5 devices we have, the 3 cell phones and the 2 laptops, been able to initially triage or go through that, and there is just nothing to indicate through call records, through anything on those devices, through interviews, through anything in our systems that he was aided in this attack by anybody. And again, I have to caveat, like the governor said, this is 24 hours into it. And that could change, but right now we've got a much better picture and much more confidence on what we were dealing with than we were just 24 hours ago.
All right, look, thank y'all so very much. Again, we are going to try to get y'all as much information as possible. So any additional information will be put out through press releases. Thank you so very much.
Are we going to be making Bourbon Street pedestrian only, or are we going to be allowing cars?
Bring me in.
You've been listening to state and local officials in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, not far from where I am in New Orleans, talk about yesterday's deadly truck attack on Bourbon Street. And we got a whole heck of a lot of new information, including the somewhat astounding fact that the FBI is done on Bourbon Street, has handed the street back to the city of New Orleans, and that they intend to have it open for business and tourists and celebrations by game time today of the Sugar Bowl. That is 3 p.m. Central, 4 p.m. Eastern. Omar Villafranca is with me to go through all the rest that we heard. We got a lot of new information, including, I think, a headline off the top, which is no known accomplices. In other words, a lone wolf.
No, yeah, they were saying that they believe he was a lone wolf. But it was also interesting to see, remember, we were hearing about IEDs being placed, and that's why they were saying there may be other accomplices. Assistant FBI director came out and said it was him who was placing those IEDs several hours before he drove down this street behind us. Him placing those IEDs.
So we got a timeline as well, and I should say I mentioned Baton Rouge. The presser was in New Orleans, not far from where I'm standing. The timeline is interesting. The truck was rented on the 30th of December. He drives here on the 31st.
Yep.
In the early morning hours before the attack on the 1st, he posts 5 videos to social media. Notable for several reasons. One, he clearly says 100% I'm part of ISIS now. The FBI says this is 100% inspired by ISIS. And initially, he was going to harm his family and friends. But then, as the FBI details it, he was concerned that that wouldn't focus the attention on what he wanted. What he wanted was this to be about believers and disbelievers and a battle between the two.
And the FBI also said he joined ISIS, they think, before this summer. And that's giving time for possible planning, which is what we're hoping to hear more from. And I'm sure that will come out. They have multiple cell phones and laptops. I'm sure they're going through that, and maybe we'll find out more about that. But you mentioned the videos. They said one of the last videos was at 3:02 a.m. and around 3:15 is when they believe he drove down Bourbon Street right behind us. So after posting one of those videos, then the attack happened.
So this very quickly becomes a conversation about radicalization, because this is a 10-year Army vet born in the U.S., father to at least 2 children here in the U.S., was in the reserves, went to college, in many respects would seem to be doing okay, and yet somehow finds his way to this.
And born and grew up in Beaumont, Texas. I lived in Beaumont, Texas, Jefferson County, not far from the Louisiana border. It's an oil and gas type town. So it's odd somebody coming from there, but it can happen anywhere in America.
Which is why, and this is important for our viewers, the FBI is saying if you knew this guy even in a tangential way, or you were even present on New Year's Eve on Bourbon Street, they want to hear from you because they're not sure what information could connect to their investigation.
And I find that interesting because you're right. There's multiple investigations, I'm sure some that we don't fully know about, and they're going down trail. They said over 400 tips came in from all over the country, not just here in New Orleans. So they, of course, want to get more information from people, track it down, see if any dots connect. They don't want people connecting the dots online.
Yeah, they got 3 phones and 2 laptops, so they've got a lot more to go into. Yeah. But amazingly, just over 24 hours from the attack itself, Bourbon Street will be reopened. And we've seen some activity, actually, behind us, the mouth of Bourbon Street there. They're putting in some anti-vehicle ramming devices, these about waist-high yellow iron obstacles that would prevent a vehicle from going down. But let's bring in Scott McFarland, who's on the north lawn of the White House. Scott, it seemed like President Biden yesterday had some information that we now got a bigger picture of from the FBI itself, and those briefings will continue. What can you tell us?
Yeah, momentarily, President Biden returns here to the White House from Camp David. Then in about 20 minutes, he is scheduled for an in-situation room briefing, a private briefing with his Homeland Security officials about whatever threats remain from New Orleans or from Las Vegas. You'll recall the president drew some connective tissue last night between the Las Vegas investigation and the New Orleans investigation, which the FBI just severed now. We also know there's a briefing this morning for members of Congress from the FBI and Homeland Security officials about what threats remain. There is, of grave concerns from the Louisiana delegation about whether this was going to metastasize into other public safety threats. And there has been, pretty openly, Tony, some cynicism, including from the Louisiana congressional delegation, about the FBI's transparency and their concerns the FBI won't be transparent in this investigation. We also saw former President Trump posting on social media his cynicism about the FBI, but you heard just now from the FBI about the latest in its investigation. And I'll add this, Tony. There is, as just behind me, construction of the inaugural platforms for January 20th and concern about the security then.
Yeah, all eyes will be on Washington, D.C. then, but for now we're here in New Orleans. I want to go to Nicole Skanga, though, who's in Washington following the investigation here. Nicole, you had the reporting as we led into the presser that there were no known accomplices. That now appears to be accurate, confirmed by the FBI. I tell you what, though, chills when they said 2 confirmed IEDs and they described them as functional. That's a very bad sign indeed. What else did you hear?
Yeah, Tony, night and day in terms of this press conference. Why did the FBI come out today and say actually no known accomplices? Well, they took 5 devices from locations that they searched and the scene, 2 laptops, 3 phones. They have scoured those call records and those messages. They say they are confident that there were no accomplices here. In addition to that, they found 2 viable IEDs. You mentioned it there, improvised explosive devices, one on the intersection of Bourbon and Orleans Street in a cooler, another one 2 blocks away. They had found 2 other devices that they looked into and then determined were not improvised explosives. Part of the reason the FBI said that they were probing whether or not there were accomplices here is that passerbys, after those improvised explosive devices were placed, they were in coolers, and passerbys were checking them out. They were picking them up. They were looking at them. The FBI there saying that they were placed on New Year's Day around 1 or 2 a.m. And looking over surveillance video, FBI first believed that some of those bystanders, those passerbys, might have been involved. Now they say they've seen the video of the suspect placing those IEDs, and they're confident that he acted alone.
All right, Nicole, thank you very much. To recap for our viewers, the FBI says it believes the truck attacker acted alone and that there is no longer any danger to the public in the New Orleans area. It also said the attacker posted several videos online proclaiming in clear language his support for ISIS, said he had joined ISIS. Also, no definitive connection at this point, nothing definitive, key word there, between the attack here and the Cybertruck explosion in Las Vegas. Our live coverage of the investigation is going to continue on CBS News 24/7 and also on the CBS Evening News. We'll have complete coverage tonight. This has been a CBS News special report. I'm Tony Dokoupil in New Orleans.